Hi, this is Daniel Hutchins, and today we're doing our part 4 of final season of Spider-Man Dan. As you see, I have my Spider-Man hat, and so, yeah, you already know the drill. I'm just going to be talking about information regarding to the comic book universe, but today's article site we're going to be using is cbr.com. Okay, so from cbr.com we are talking about G.I. Joe Extreme failed to bring a real American hero into the 90s. Okay, so featuring an all-new cast of Joes and foes, G.I. Joe Extreme was a hilarious 90s rebrand of the series full of garishly over-the-top elements. Okay, this was from 8 hours ago. The G.I. Joe franchise goes back several decades, but it really hit the big in the 1980s with the Real American Hero reboot. This version had a popular toy line, the corresponding cartoon and comic book, with the later making Larry Hama the iconic name in the comic industry. Unfortunately, since then, the series has failed to attain the same level of consistency and generational popularity as Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. One of the first radical reinterpretations of the 80s version of the franchise was G.I. Joe Extreme, featuring an all-new cast of Joes and foes. Now, G.I. Joe Extreme was a hilarious 90s rebrand of the series full of garishly over-the-top elements. It's since become lost to time with many of its concepts forgotten. Here's a look back at the chapter of the Joe's history that many don't remember, but for a good reason. Related to this article is Snake Eyes' Arashikage clan is better than Batman Begins, League of Shadows. But we're not talking about that, we're talking about something else. So first we're going to say, what was G.I. Joe Extreme? The ill-fated and arguably just as ill-conceived G.I. Joe Extreme ran from 1995 to 1997, with its toy line, cartoon, and comic book all failing to achieve even half the popularity of its predecessors. The cartoon story and all other accompanying fiction were set in the future removed from the conflict of the former G.I. Joe team and terrorist organization Cobra. Instead of the threat this time was SCAR, which is Soldiers of Chaos, Anarchy, and Ruin, led by the evil Iron Claw, who, like his organization, eschewed proper literacy and spelling. This group's plans involved taking over the former Soviet bloc, and eventually the world at large. Opposing them and several mercenaries that added to the suicidal fracas was the new incarnation of the G.I. Joe, led by Lieutenant Stone, and working with presidential liaison Mr. Clancy. Stone heavily resembled Duke from the 80s series, with many of his compatriots also being stand-ins for older characters. The sole female, Mayday, was a dead-bringer for a fellow redhead Scarlet. Freight recalls Roadblock and Heavy Duty, while the Ninja Black Dragon is much more a vocal replacement for Snake Eyes. The team was also joined by Sergeant Savage, who was a returning character from the spin-off series titled Sergeant Savage and His Screaming Eagles. Gruff, tough, and rough around the edges, the former World War II soldier was essentially a cross between Captain America and Sergeant Rock. Meanwhile, Iron Claw took Cobra Commander's spot. His allies Rampage and Duchess of Maclavia were ex-spies of Destro and the Baroness, with the Duchess being exclusive to the comic book, Cobra Commander made a few cameos in the series, loosely tying things together with the old show and making the villain the only Old Joe character around. The show lasted for 2 seasons, attaining only 26 episodes in total run for its 2-year run. It's now most known for its equally extreme intro, which combines screaming, a 90s hip-hop beat, and an attempt to seem dark and topical. Its art style is also rather moody, recalling later shows such as Spider-Man Unlimited and Spawn. Related to this article is G.I. Joe Renegades is the franchise's forgotten peak. But we're not talking about that, we're talking about someone else. The legacy of G.I. Joe Extreme. Currently, G.I. Joe Extreme has been long forgotten both in the annals of 90s cartoons and G.I. Joe franchise. Many who've taken a look back at the series decry its obvious attempts to ride to the extreme wave of products, such as the books from Image Comics at the time, as well as being almost completely divorced from the previous iteration of the series. It didn't help that the show, even with all its 90s bluster, seemed to close to the 80s in terms of actual writing quality. Since then, none of Extreme's characters have appeared much, with the exceptions of faction leaders Lieutenant Stone and Iron Claw. The former was first brought back in G.I. Joe Sigma 6 animated series, reimagined as British M16 agent who had his damaged arm replaced with a bionic one. He was also an old ally of Duke, likely homaging him, essentially replacing him in Extreme. This incarnation somewhat influenced the new version of in Devil's Due G.I. Joe comics. Another version, this time called Sergeant Stone, was played by Brendan Fraser in a brief scene in G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, though he strangely bore more resemblance to Flint. Iron Claw had also had a few cameos over the years, before finally getting a new toy in style of the Real American Hero line in 2013. With the franchise still failing to come back in a big way, it's unknown if G.I. Joe Extreme will ever be touched upon again, though the chances are extremely low. So there you go, guys. That's just a little bit of some of the history of G.I. Joe Extreme and how it failed to receive So if you guys like this content, please hit that thumbs up button, and you have a wonderful rest of your morning. Bye.